All right, welcome to a semi-emergency, or is it more of a catastrophe from Way Downtown podcast. I am Mac Linus from the Indianapolis Star, joined by Pacers insider Dustin DePirac. Dustin, so Myles Turner is taking his talents to Milwaukee, beautiful Milwaukee, in
It's a
what
better city
was
than anybody thinks, but yeah, go on.
only in the summertime. Only in the
Fair. Also
summertime.
true.
Having
Mhm.
a lake and having a Major League Baseball team helps.
Yes,
And they got good beer. And if you
they do.
like heart attacks, it's like a great city. Their
Sure
their
is.
cuisine will
Mhm.
just clog your arteries
Mm.
left and right. But so I was actually debating with my wife on the way to dinner tonight where this ranks in terms of like Indianapolis stunning sports news.
Yeah,
And she had mentioned Brad Stevens going to the Celtics.
that's bigger.
I mentioned Andrew Luck retiring. I said that was bigger too.
Sure. Yeah, definitely is.
But this is on the list.
Yeah.
Um,
hmm
so I'm not going to even ask you if you saw this coming, but instead of like how it seemed like everyone was so confident that
hmm
Myles Turner was going to return. That was the word that they wanted to re-sign him.
hmm
Everyone was kind, people around the league were saying, Myles Turner is going to stay with the Pacers. And then Game 7, Tyrese Haliburton blows out his Achilles, and apparently the calculus just changed on everything, and it obviously
Yeah.
did change everything. But there was still this assumption
hmm
that he was going to come back, that they were still going to go into the tax to keep him, to keep this core together. Yes,
hmm
next year seems like it's not going to be great,
hmm
but 2026, 2027, I mean, they still had this core.
Sure.
So what happened? What happened, Dustin?
Yeah, I mean, right now I don't know all of the who called who, when, who did what, when, but just from obviously piecing together what's pretty publicly available, you look at the offer he got, and you look at obviously Greg did some reporting and found that the offer he saw was 4 years for 24 million each, right? 4 years, 95 million. So he obviously got 4 years, 107 million. One thing obviously that changed in there is that prior to Milwaukee making a pretty bold move by waiving Damian Lillard, just from waiving and stretching, because like you still got to pay him, a lot of that money. We've not all of that money, and you're also
22
going to,
million a year. That's 22 million a year they're paying him. So like
yeah.
in
So you're kind of
aggregate, it's
stretching that
50
out.
something million. Yeah, it's 50
Yeah,
something million to be paying for one slot.
right, exactly.
And Myles Turner's not an all-star. So like that's 50 million
Mm,
you're sinking into one spot for a good center, above
right,
average, a good
sure.
center. I don't want to diminish Myles' accomplishment, but he's not a difference maker. He's not going to make the Bucks a contender.
He'll help. I mean, obviously he'll help the Pacers. Like, if you don't like it. Like, you have to take a minute to slot Myles exactly where he belongs, which is somewhere between the 10 and 15 range in top centers in the NBA. There's some things he does better or almost better than everybody. There's some things he does, kind of below par. I mean, I think he was, I checked, like, he was
Rebound.
second this year among all centers in total 3-pointers. He was, I think he was third in total blocks, just behind Wembanyama and Brook Lopez. And it's crazy how far ahead Wembanyama still was, even though he played 46 games. That's nuts. That's crazy. But all the same, I mean, he did a couple things really, really well, but he didn't rebound nearly on that level. But ultimately, had some games, had some performances, did some important things that got the Pacers where they were. I mean, he's a difference maker in the sense that, like, you call him a role player or whatever, but he played the center position well enough to get them where they needed. He was above the line. I mean, he's an above replacement, player for sure at the 5. And so, there are only so many of those guys. Like, I mean, obviously there's Jokic, there's a healthy version of Joel Embiid, there's Karl Anthony Towns, there's a few other guys that are way, way up there. They're making like in the 50 million. They come down to the Bam Adebayos of the world. And then there's kind of another level down. And somewhere in there you get to Myles, but I mean, he's above almost everything that was otherwise going to be available on the free agent market. So you had to consider all that. But you also had to consider the fact that there wasn't a whole lot of salary cap room. So, but if you're the Bucks, you're just looking to do something. And because by this point it was the biggest name on the market and you were going to have, kind of a dead spot anyway, you're thinking, okay, well, what can you do to show Giannis that you care, to show Giannis that you want to make a push here? And there's not a lot of big moves on the table. And this is a big move. And apparently he's not super excited about about how this went down because of what it does for Lillard, as has been reported. But all the same, it's at least saying like, hey, look, man, we're trying. We're trying to do something. We're it's not easy to make moves right now. There's not a whole lot on the board, but look, we're giving this a shot. This is us, obviously making a move that doesn't make us look great and forces us to a little bit undercut, like a 7-time All-NBA guy and move on from him. But this is us trying. But so if you're the Pacers, you don't see that coming, and so it seems like just if you kind of look at the numbers, it's like, all right, that if the offer was $24 million a year, that puts you over the luxury tax, but it keeps you underneath, safely underneath the first apron. And that's sort of telling you, okay, like this is what we're willing to go. We're willing to pay the tax, but we don't want to get into restrictions. We don't want to get into a point where it's a little bit harder for us to make moves. And first apron only hurts you so much. Second apron is where they really get you, But
I mean, I think that's important. That's important though to let people know that, like, because the news comes out and the way that Shams framed it and their agents framed it is like, well, Indianapolis is a version to the tax. I mean, they haven't paid the tax in 20 years. And this contract that, that Greg reported, 4 years, $95 million, puts them in the tax. So this whole idea that like the Pacers didn't want to pay the tax, no, they didn't want to go into the apron. And that's understandable because of the roster restrictions, because you don't know what next year's going to look like. Next year could be a total disaster if you don't have Tyrese Haliburton. And you're asking yourself certain questions about maybe wanting some roster flexibility to change some things. So, I mean, it's understandable from a Pacer standpoint, like to keep that door open. But this whole idea that like Herb wasn't going to pay the tax is, if Greg's source is right, and we trust it is because we ran with it, then, that's kind of a BS argument that we're seeing out there.
Right. I mean, there's still like to Greg's point within the column, there's PR, there's a version because the higher you go, the more tax you pay. So it's like it's a basically you could also argue like he was willing to only go this far in terms of how much he was willing to pay on the tax, and he was willing to go this far as the apron's concerned. Obviously, I mean, like the first apron's only so much. I mean, it's really kind of restricts like how much money you can give back. But you can still aggregate salaries at the first apron. It's the second apron you can't aggregate salaries, so you can't like trade two guys for one. That kind of thing. And so like that makes it a little bit more difficult, to make moves once you get in the second apron. But the first apron, there's still a few things that make it a little bit difficult. But I mean, they could have cleared out space. I mean, it's one of those things where if you're the Pacers, in terms of acceptable outcomes, going into the first apron and then looking at other ways to kind of chip away at your salary to get back underneath it is a far more like you'd much rather have that outcome than the one you have now, where you lose the guy. And so,
all right, question for you then: if they'd re-signed Myles to the contract he wanted that he got, and they're in the apron, what do you do with Matherin and Nesmith who are up for contract extensions? How much further is that going to push you? Does that push you to the second apron where you're really going to be hamstrung?
Yeah, I mean, it could. I mean, but it also depends on what you want to do. I think I got to look at the apron number, but I think there's probably another 20 million between. I think it's 20 million between the luxury tax, probably 13 million between the first apron and the second apron. I think that's right. I think I could be wrong about that, but I had to double check it. But if I'm not mistaken, the second apron figure is 207. And that's for now. So also you got to remember that, if those extensions don't kick in the next year, you're looking at a 7% bump next year, which I think probably had a factor as well, because not a 10% bump. There was a presumption that that's the most you can do, because they don't like, I think it was a year way back where they bumped the salary cap up like a whole lot from one year to another, like, I don't know, 25% or something crazy. And nobody, basically like everybody wanted to be a free agent that year. Like nobody wanted to sign a contract that would keep them on a team past that year. And there was just a mass amount of, free agency and a mass amount of player changing and everything like that. And so the league doesn't ever want to do it again. So they're saying, okay, the line for how much this can go up year to year is 10%. So they basically, the fact that it's not going up 10% is like, okay, that there's obviously some kind of media rights issue that's not, even though they got the big national rights issue, there must be something else that's kind of slowing things up in terms of, league-wide revenue. So if you're not,
someone's got to pay Stephen A. Smith.
What's that? Exactly.
I said someone's got to pay Stephen A. Smith.
So that's 3% that's not that you're kind of banking on. It's not going to be there as far as cap room, as far as, you know, luxury tax room, first apron room, second apron room, those kind of things. So it does make an impact, and you don't know already what you want to do with Mathurin. You know, like I don't think that's obvious at all, and certainly haven't seen a whole lot of movement on that standpoint. It's not like they said, okay, well, if we're not going to get Myles, let's jump in and sign Mathurin to his extension. You know,
And that's if Mathurin accepts it, you know, because
right,
like
exactly.
you wrote
So
earlier, like this,
right.
this is he's going to, if you know things stay as they are now, like he's your number 2 option on offense behind Siakam. Like he's your gunner at 2 at the 2. So he's going to put up bigger numbers than he would have if there was a healthy Haliburton. So like maybe, and he seems like the player who will bet on himself. He has extreme confidence, so he will bet on himself and say, yeah, he will say, I will ball out. I will average 22 and I will make $30 million a year next year, kind of thing.
Exactly.
Like, or going into that. So
yeah, if you're throwing 5 years 100 at him right now, he's like, nope, no chance. Not happening, you know, at all. So, you know, he's certainly going to want to make a move and everything like that. And whatever, you know, like if you're putting anything on the table at that level, he's going to be like, nah, I'm going to take a real run at this. And they're probably not offering that much anyway. You know, I mean, like, I think I don't know how they would feel about offering him more than Nembhard got. So, you know, that's kind of an interesting thing, and they'd probably want to see it anyway. So more likely than not, you're looking at them riding it out, unless they feel like there's a move that they can make that where they package him and Walker or somebody like that, for a more established center that they feel that they can, you know, lock up long term. But I don't know who that looks like at this point. It's like, that's like $16 million, you know, between those.
Yeah, no, exactly. Those are your 2 trade chips, you know, that, like people would want. Like Toppin's a trade chip in terms of the salary that you can send out, but you still so you can get something, you know, higher end on the way back. But like, how many people want to be paying Toppin $16 million over the next 3 years? You know, so that's
exactly. And so, you know, you're looking at, you're trying to combine things that, you know, include salary so you can make the move, but also something that's intriguing for somebody. And, you know, I think Benedict Mathurin is the most intriguing piece that you would think about moving. Sure. If you're the Pacers, I think you have to circle, you know, Haliburton, obviously, but also Siakam and, you know, for the purpose of this season, Andrew Nembhard, and say, okay, those are my untouchable pieces. What else you want to do, you know, and you'd be not too, you know, keen to move on to Nesmith either. I mean, I'd put him pretty close to untouchable, but after that, you have to make everything else available, as far as just looking into stuff. If you're still thinking, okay, you know, got to keep something together for these guys to be, you know, to have another crack at it in 2026, 27, when you get Haliburton back. You know, I think those are the pieces that you actually, you know, that you probably have to say, okay, just keep all of those and everything else is at least up for discussion. So, yeah. And so the bottom line, there's only so much money to move. If you say, you know, if you're going to say, all right, Toppin, you know, McConnell, Mathurin, Walker are chips are available that you could use. I mean, you know, that's 25 million between Toppin and McConnell, 16 million. So you've got like kind of a total of 41 million in salaries that you could even conceivably put together. If you were going to move all of them, and that's a lot because you still have to fill all those pieces and put together a roster. So, you know, they are not in an advantage standpoint. And, you know, obviously the other piece to it is if you would have known that, all right, there's somebody out there. The killer thing is they just didn't know Milwaukee was out there putting themselves in a position they could just make this signing without having to do a sign and trade. You know, like I'm going to think if you're the Pacers, you're sort of waiting for him to go out and come back with a, you know, sign and trade option of somebody who might be interested in paying you $30 million, but just doesn't have the cap room. And, you know, making it work that way. And then you get a piece back and, you know, you can parlay that into something or whatever. And all of a sudden you have assets, you know, this way it happens and you lose your asset and you still don't have cap room. So, I mean, you have
exactly.
You have access to the taxpayer mid-level, about 14.1 million. But most of the guys that you would have signed to that are already off the table. DeAndre Ayton is the only guy left.
That's it. One.
Maybe Al Horford, if you're willing to pay money to a 39-year-old.
But he won't want to come here. He won't. He's 39. He's 39. He wants to play for contender. Like he won't want to come here.
You wouldn't.
And
you wouldn't think unless you can't find better options. So
yeah, I mean, Ayton is the guy, and you know, obviously the Pacers signed him to that massive max offer sheet 3 years
Yeah.
ago.
Mhm.
And that's kind of like, that was like a sliding doors moment at that time.
Sure.
Like, what happens if they don't match that, where we are now, that kind of thing. But so they matched it. He's not a max player. Obviously, he's been
Mhm.
waived by Portland after
Mhm.
Phoenix matches, so he's been on the move, and he's just
Yeah, and there's some not great reporting coming out of Portland about how that went.
no.
The Athletic just wrote a pretty extensive piece about things that went wrong. Reportedly, allegedly, I guess, went wrong as far as that was concerned. So, it's not a super attractive option, right there either. So,
No, I mean his numbers are, when healthy, are
Mhm.
okay, on the
Sure.
face of them. But
He's a heck of an
I mean,
athlete
I'm
for sure.
yeah, and I think averaged 14 and 10 last year, and the 10
Mhm.
would be nice. The rebounds for a
Sure.
team that, as it's constructed right now,
Mhm.
Aaron Nesmith is your best rebounder. Him and like Obi, I guess,
And
but
that's not,
that's
well, Pascal's she's still your best rebounder.
yeah, yes, yeah. But
Statistically, and that's,
okay,
yeah. So,
I guess that's what matters. But Ayton, the numbers look good, but like you see the clips of like his motor or lack thereof,
yeah.
and that's just concerning. But at 14, it's a little more palatable, as
Mhm.
opposed to the 133 over 4 years that was offered before. So
Sure.
maybe it's a reclamation project, and you kind of, I mean, you almost have to take it. The big question is like, are the Lakers going to be, does
Yeah.
he want to go play for the Lakers?
Yeah.
Though if LeBron stays in the Lakers and your motor sucks, then that's not going to be an enjoyable
That's
experience
for you. No.
for
Mhm.
you. So, I mean,
I mean,
probably worth a punt.
if your motor sucks, you're not going to enjoy anything. Like,
That's
if,
fair.
if it's bad enough, you just shouldn't be playing basketball. Like, if you don't have any fun with this, what are you still doing? Like collection.
Well, you're getting 14 million. Yeah, you get
Yeah.
$14 million.
No, for sure. I mean, I don't. I mean, like, obviously, there's a, like, I guess there's the potential, but the vibes are also down, for the Pacers. They have to be with this. And it's like you can imagine a scenario where you imagine last year's group and you insert Ayton as a backup, center, and just say, like, just presume vibes are going to carry him over and make him a better player. Because and it certainly worked with other guys. There have been players that, just hadn't had opportunities. They came back and were just like, man, I can't wait to play for these guys. And then you see how the ball pops and you see that Haliburton finds you, if it's basically, it's like, your energy will get rewarded. Like, you're never going to feel like you're wasting time. You're never going to feel like you're wasting effort. Because if you run the floor, you're going to get rewarded. Like, that's kind of like the base thing as to like why people want to play for the Pacers, is like Haliburton will reward you. It's like, well, you don't have Haliburton now. Nemhard probably will too. At least he'll try. It's just not quite as effective at that part of it. He is effective, but he's not quite as effective as kicking the ball ahead and, all those things that Haliburton does to reward a running big man. There's potential positives there, but you also take, like, you would even, for all the connection and issues there and whatnot, like, you'd rather have Turner there to, if you got Ayton on a veteran minimum, you wouldn't hate the idea of Myles Turner, kind of bringing him up and being like, hey, this is how we play, and something like that. But if you bring in a guy like that, like, he's got to be your starter. And so, he doesn't have.
Well, Tony Bradley isn't.
No, Tony Bradley's not. I mean, good for Tony Bradley, just for them picking up his option. I mean, like, talk about a guy who made the most out of his situation. Like, this is a guy who was stuck in the G League for 2 years, got a chance, and just went in there and made the most of it by getting in Mitchell Robinson and Isaiah Hartenstein's way.
Yeah.
That was enough for them to at least give him a club option. That doesn't mean that they're going to keep him either. I don't even know if they picked up the option to keep him, or if they were hoping they were going to be able to package him in a smaller trade, and they could still certainly do something like that.
I mean, does the fact that they had to play Tony Bradley in those series kind of illustrate the problem with Myles, though? That they had to play Tony Bradley against Mitchell Robinson because Myles couldn't rebound. That they had to play Tony Bradley against Hartenstein because Myles couldn't rebound. Like, to me, that's like almost an indictment on a guy who wants $30 million a year. Like, we had to keep you on the bench in these really critical moments because you just weren't getting it done. And so,
but
like,
again,
I get it. What you're saying is
in a world where you can ideally reward and sort of punish everything, where you can say, okay, like, this is worth this and that is worth this, and I'm not going to pay somebody this much money if he can't do that. Like, you can do that, but that's how you end up letting the guy walk. Like
if he has a better finals, are they paying him what the Bucks paid him?
It depends on how much better. I mean, it's if they win the series in spite of Haliburton's injury, yes. But I mean, I think it really just comes down to they were only willing to go so deep into tax and so deep into first apron if they weren't going to have Haliburton. I think that's the end of the day thing, is that like I'm sure they brought that argument up in discussions, but I mean, rebounding's been an issue, in the past. And so if they were just ready to move on from him, if they just felt like he wasn't good enough, like they, could have told him to walk at the beginning of this and they would have been better prepared.
That's fair. Yeah, that's fair.
If they were just like, like, I don't feel like we can win if that's how you're going to play, so you wouldn't have dragged out, negotiations that way and saying like,
that's fair.
I want you, but 27 is too rich, like we're willing to go 23, but not 27. Like, that's not how you would operate if you were like, well, it's just the difference in how you played in these finals. Like the difference is Haliburton towards Achilles, like if they win that, or even if they lose and Haliburton's healthy, even if they just get beaten game 7, they gave every indication that they were going to go as far in the tax as they had to do. And they throw a $30 million offer out of them the day after the finals. And that thing's done 2 or 3 days before July 1, like I think that's how it works. I think it's more of a case of not willing to go up to the apron, or, not really wanting to go into the tax and just wanting to get an amount of money over the tax that you could get back under eventually. So, that's kind of my read on that. I don't like, they seem so sure of the idea beforehand. And it's like, again, like for as much as he didn't play well in the finals, he didn't play well in the Eastern Conference Finals. Like, you don't expect to be there in the first place, like he, and his performance against Cleveland is a big part of why you made it, like, I mean, he was really good in that round. And so if you don't get what you got out of him in that round, you don't beat the number 1 seed in the East, and you don't end up in the Eastern Conference Finals in the first place. And, then you never end up in the NBA Finals. So even though he kind of lags a little bit in those last 2 series, you're not there if you don't have a really good performance for him during the regular season, but also in, a critical kind of one that just accelerates your trajectory in those playoffs when you take out the team that you were not supposed to beat.
Yeah, it sounds like it's one of those don't know what you got until it's gone type of deals.
Yes.
With Myles,
Right.
No. I mean, especially with the fans have been on his butt for, almost for 10 years, with the same complaints. But again, like you pointed out, there are only so many bigs who shoot threes at his rate and who block shots at his rate. And he's kind of a unicorn, not to the level of Wembanyama. I mean, and Brook Lopez does great things, but he's also old, and he's right. I mean, Myles is filling his spot in Milwaukee, so they don't really have to change much of what they're doing. They're just plugging in for a younger, more explosive kind of version of that, and the Pacers are just left with this huge void, right? Where it looks like Tony Bradley, Isaiah Jackson, and Thomas Bryant are here.
Yeah. No, I mean, right now you'd start Obi. If you had to play tomorrow, you'd start Obi at the 5 and just try to, rock it that way. Because you don't know what Isaiah Jackson looks like yet. I mean, like we've obviously seen him. He was around for a pregame, for practice between finals and stuff like that. You saw him shooting around. It looks bigger, and I don't know what to make of that yet. He's just obviously visibly larger. And so how much of that is muscle? How much is that just not being able to do cardio for months? Will some of that melt off? Will it not? Does it become muscle? Does he become, even if he is more muscular, does he lose some leaping ability? What kind of player does he become with that weight? And again, like might be good, might be net positive. Don't know.
Is it odd? That he hasn't taken that $6.5 million yet?
I mean, I would say so. I mean, but maybe he just is kind of hoping somebody.
No one's giving him that. No one is giving. They might give him like a multi-year. They might give him like 2-year deal, but
one's giving him
$6.5 million.
I wouldn't think so, but I mean, we also saw Milwaukee rescind Ryan Rollins' offer, so there also might be a thing of like where how in college basically when they're like, we're giving you an offer, but it's not committable. Like we want you to be able to list it, but like we're not ready for you to actually commit to us, that kind of thing. You could tell all your friends and all the, recruiting writers that, you have an offer, but like, that doesn't mean that we're ready to take you on.
Yeah, don't make up one of those cool Tipton edits just yet.
No,
Just have that in the back
don't do one of those. Keep that together. But like, when you commit to somebody else, you could say you had a such and such offer and it'll make you look cool. Go ahead and do that. So yeah, I mean, like, I don't know, what that looks like or something like that, or so I saw they rescinded an offer from Ryan Rollins, the Bucks did. I'm sure, that was connected to this, downwind. So I would say, I am a little bit surprised because I figured he'd be just like 6.4, shoot, let's do it. Don't have how many years or anything, but I'm a little bit surprised that hasn't just popped yet either. And maybe it'll fly under the radar because even him picking, him getting the offer kind of flew under the radar as well. So we'll see what that looks like. I mean, I still think it made sense just independently of anything else to keep him around, just because I think you want to know, I'm interested just to see what he looks like with muscle. I don't know. He might be a lot better. He could be. So I'm very intrigued. Obviously, he's been very skinny, and see what that looks like. But I mean, he had really exceptional leaping ability as well. So is he going to get up that body, even if it is good weight? Is he going to be able to get up at the same level? I'm very interested to see what that looks like and what kind of player he becomes. So he was worth the flyer anyway. But that was taking you closer to that tax already. So we'll see how it goes in terms of what that looks like. And obviously with him making a little more money, he could be part of a trade chip situation as well.
That's true.
So there's a lot of moving parts for them right now as far as what their next steps are.
Anything on James Wiseman? Obviously, former number 2 overall pick, loads of talent. They liked enough of him to give him try to resuscitate his career here. Blew out his Achilles just right after Isaiah Jackson did. It's just like, damn, can't catch a break. They traded him away. Then he got to Toronto, I believe. Then he got cut, and they liked him enough to let him work out in the Pacers facility. So I mean, and I get it. It's like, do you really want to take chances on 2 guys with Achilles injuries, especially like big men with Achilles injuries? But what's the read on the Wiseman?
I know, Rick Carlisle was even talking to he mentioned on his radio interview, he was talking to his agent, after, because he was talking about it after the Haliburton Achilles, and said, he's he said how, Wiseman was doing a 360 dunk. So they're at least maintaining enough contact with them just to talk and say, hey, how's he doing? What's that look like? I mean, this is not his first major injury. He had a major, meniscus. And so you're compounding stuff now. And so that makes it harder to trust, basically, as far as being willing to invest in it. I guess it wouldn't, if they can't do better than Jackson as a starter, if he ends up being the top line guy, and it's not as crazy to keep Wiseman around if he's kind of your third guy out of everybody, just to kind of see where it goes. Certainly have the big body there, but I mean, like, you're not looking at James Wiseman as your long-term solution. I think you saw a lot of good things from him in practice. It's still just having a just better feel, for the game. But I mean, he's got a lot of athleticism, got a lot of size. Just you're going to be able to score at the rim by virtue of just him being big and being able to rebound the basketball. But the more complex parts of the game, you don't know if that's really going to be there. And you just don't know what the whole rehab thing is going to be like. Again, it's a lot to take a chance on 2 of those guys, and especially when you're in this situation where you really, you don't have a starter at the moment. So like, what ends up being the smart move, like you have to imagine them on the radar, but I don't know if that's a risk they're willing to take.
I mean, if Toppin starts, your top reserve is Jarris Walker next year. Assuming that besides TJ, being the scoring punch. I mean, you're going to have Jarris played 3-4, the 3 and the 4, maybe the 2, maybe the 5, and he can bring the ball up too. So I mean, he becomes a lot more interesting and important to next year's roster.
Sam Jones has to play. Johnny Furphy has to play. Like
Johnny Furphy.
There's still a lot of moves that have to be made. I mean, they have to try to do something. And And I don't think anything that's on the free agent market is going to be enough. Now, what that looks like, hard to say, but they have to look at something to make this team functional.
Nick Richards is a name that's been floated out. Okay, you're not sold on that one.
I'm not sold on. I mean, I guess if you trade Jackson, like he's
the
not
money almost matches up. Yeah,
he's not making crazy
million.
money. He's not making crazy money, so you might be able to do that.
But he's got injury problems of his own.
Yeah, he's got injury problems of his own. He's been up and down as far as that's concerned. It's chancy. It's an idea. It doesn't give you any long-term solution, but at least it gives you somebody that you can run out there and it be functional. So if you don't, if you're not sold on where Isaiah is, you can make that move and trade him to Phoenix. But it's also, Phoenix has enough centers. What are you giving them that they want at this point? Like that makes sense.
Don't give them that first round pick you just got back. That's for sure.
You don't do that. I think you protect that at this point pretty,
you're scouting big men. You're just scouting big men right now.
Yeah, you're pretty protective of that particular pick right now.
I mean, before Turner left, we were still looking at this team as you got your 5 starters back. You've got everyone still under contract. Besides James Johnson, really, that was gonna. So you're still looking at a team that ceiling maybe the 6th seed in the East,
right?
Especially with all what's going on in the East. But now, post some of these trades and moves, the East, obviously Tatum being out still hurts Boston, but and all the players they've gotten rid of. But Detroit made some moves today. Obviously, the Knicks are still pretty good.
Right.
The Magic are going to be good. Cleveland's going to be good. So, I mean, the 6 was the ceiling. Now, I mean, the play-in might even be.
It might be hard. I mean, I'm just waiting to see how it shakes out. It's one of those things where it's like I don't think, for as much as it doesn't show a willingness to win now, that they weren't willing to just say, we'll put the number on the table that has to be there. For them to kind of hedge on this, even if you imagine, I'm not saying imagine, even if they gave the offer that Greg gave, like that was hedgy, like that was being like, I don't know about this, and so if that's how they were kind of approaching it in the first place, like they're not necessarily going full bore at it. But I mean, I also do kind of look and say, all right, like if you weren't, like you kind of have to try something, like, I mean, I don't know that it makes sense to let this team get crushed, and because you lose a lot of momentum. I mean, it's like you're asking a lot of guys that just played in the finals to go backwards dramatically. And so do you, like your superpower was your connectivity, was this feeling of momentum, this feeling of like you had figured out, the solution to the NBA, you'd gotten everything right and you'd created this new way of building a team and way of winning. And, like you're asking basically everybody who's not Myles and Ty to just kind of suffer through one if you're not going to make some kind of move here to make them functional. Like they don't have to win the whole thing next year, but like they got to feel like they were at least on some kind of path. It's going to be really weird if they end up being a lottery team, for Siakam, for Nembhard, for Nesmith, for McConnell, for whoever out of that group is still around. It's like that's going to be a big ask for those guys. And then say, okay, like rewire yourself and remember 2 years ago when Haliburton gets off the shelf and maybe we had a center in the draft. Like it definitely is putting them in a tough spot. So I kind of feel like they're going to look for some way of creating a stopgap situation here.
Yeah, I hope for Herb's sake that the season ticket renewals were before Game 7 of the NBA Finals.
That'd be helpful. Because you got a bunch of them. Yeah.
I mean, because this was
those in the door. Yeah.
Losing Game 7 is bad. Losing your star player is in that Game 7 at in the first quarter when he was on an absolute heater, and it looks like, oh crap, it's going to be one of Ty's nights where he goes off.
Yeah.
NBA, the Larry O'Brien trophy, so close.
Yeah.
All that just ripped out from underneath you. Absolute worst case scenario, and then 10 days later, this happens, and you're just left like, oh, like what are we? What do we have left here? So
what's the next move? Yeah,
put on your GM hat, Dustin. What are you doing? What's the move you're making? You says they have to do something.
Yeah, I mean, Like I try to piece a trade together, and I'm not like I haven't identified what that would be. But I like that. That's my move is, and you protect that 2026. But I mean, you might look forward at some future drafts that you'd be willing to part with first rounders for. I mean, I try to basically. I mean, I look to identify like who's the best player who's stuck. Find me the best. Find me the best center who's stuck behind somebody else. That's not going to be, that's going to have a hard time getting a starting job. Like that's the guy I'm looking for. Can I get him for, if I part with 15 million worth of salary, 12 million worth of salary, can I do that? I mean, that'd be my.
Can you take
unfortunately,
a
it probably
starting center on a bad team?
What's that?
Can you take a starting center on a bad team?
I'd sooner take a backup center on a good team than a starting center on a bad team. That's my initial thought. That like on a, all things being equal sort of standpoint, like you might point somebody out to me, they're like, actually I'd rather have that guy, but that's my like kind of top of the head thought is you'll be able to get him for cheaper. He'd be happy to be there, he'd be enthusiastic, and that you can make him fit. He fits into the ethos. That again, that's like, again, there might be a guy on, I don't even know, like obviously like Toronto just re-upped with Jacob Poeltl, and so like they're fully aware that that's a guy that they can't let go for cheap, like that he's a player worth continuing to pay. So there's some other guys like that in the bottom of the basically basically the bottom of both leagues that are that they still know are valuable, and they're not going to give you up for. You're going to have to give them $30 million worth of salary to get it out of them. So So I don't know. That's my initial thought is like, if you can do it for a player or, a couple guys that are cheaper, that's my initial thought. But, there's not a lot of good opportunities out there. And do I kick the tires on Ayton? Yes, I kick the tires on Ayton. Do I call Al Horford?
You like it? Yeah.
I call Al Horford, I at least call just to say, hey, like how you feel about this? We think you could keep this group together and make it a playoff team, you got a ring a couple years ago,
do you think he is a person who could keep this team together to get into the playoffs?
Maybe just barely. I mean, it's not the best case scenario, but like you still see him do good stuff. You still see periods where he'll go, hit 3 or 4 threes in a night and, keep Boston in a game. So, could he do some pick and pop stuff with Andrew Nembhard worth doing that makes him functional? Possibly. It makes them play a different way. But it's not. So none of these are optimal. There are no optimal scenarios right now, in terms of the situation they're in.
That's the headline for the podcast. No optimal
scenarios.
Scenarios right now.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's all we got. You've fully depressed probably every Pacers fan who's right now.
I don't think I needed to do that. I think everybody else was already there.
That's fair. Well, I mean, this is for all the fans saying, get rid of Myles. Well, he did it for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So again, grass isn't always greener, but
it is not.
It's just been a rough 10 days if you're a Pacers fan. So Dustin, I appreciate you taking the time, trying to make some sense of all this. Everyone go to IndyStar.com/sports for all of Dustin's great content. He's got right now an insider column right now on what's next, and he kind of lays out a lot of this out in print form for you or text form for you. So, well, I mean, buckle up because they're not done, is what you're saying. That there's
they can't
going to happen.
They can't. Yeah, they got to do something. I don't know what that something is, but they got to do something.
All right. Well, I'll keep alerts on my phone for your tweets then, so I know when I have to run back to the computer.
There you go.
All right. Well, thanks, Dustin. Have a good one. This has been from Way Downtown Podcast. All right. Have a good one, guys.